Okay, let's dive into a story that's been whispered about for more than a century. It's an absolutely stunning tale of justice, and it comes from one of the darkest chapters in American history.
You know, this whole incredible story, it really just starts with a number.
12. That's the number of bodies that were carried out of a Charleston mansion on the morning of November 28, 1856.
And you have to understand, these were not the usual sounds you'd hear on the Fairchild plantation, an empire built on the backs of 300 enslaved people. No, this was something else entirely. This was the sound of a dynasty literally crumbling to an end. So, how does one of Charleston's most powerful families just vanish overnight? The official story, what they told the papers, was sudden illness. But the truth? Oh, the truth was so much more calculated and way more devastating. So let's ask the real question. What really happened?
All right, picture this. The scene of the crime, if you will, was the Thanksgiving feast. This was the big annual get-together for the entire Fairchild family, and these guys were a pillar of South Carolina's slave-owning elite. Every single adult who sat down at that dinner table was dead just a few hours later. And the one person, the only person who knew exactly what was in that food, she had vanished, completely gone. To really get why this happened, we've got to rewind the clock. We need to go back 23 years. So let's talk about Martha Cooper. She first set foot on the Fairchild plantation way back in 1833. She was just a young woman, sold for $800 and forced into a lifetime of servitude. And for more than 20 years, she put up with and saw things unspeakable cruelties. But then came the breaking point, the assault on her daughter, Grace, and then the brutal murder of her son, Daniel. That was it. You have to understand, what happened next wasn't some sudden act of passion. No, this was the boiling point, the culmination of a lifetime of pain. And it was a debt she was absolutely determined to see paid in full.
So the question is, how? How could one woman possibly take down an entire powerful family like that? Well, she had a secret weapon. And it was something the Fairchilds saw every single day, but something they never ever understood. Believe it or not, it was this, a simple leatherbound book. It was filled with her grandmother's recipes, and inside was generations of preserved knowledge, passed down from Africa and through the Americas. To the Fairchilds, it was just some trinket. They probably never even bothered to look inside.
And this book, wow, it had this incredible duality to it. See, on one side, you had all these recipes for healing, teas and remedies that Martha used to care for her own community. But then, on the other side, there were instructions for protection, for justice. This was knowledge that could save a life, or, in the right hands, it could absolutely take one.
So, what was her weapon of choice? Oleander, a beautiful, incredibly common, and absolutely deadly flowering shrub. Every single part of this plant contains something called cardiac glycosides, and what they do when you eat them is stop a human heart within hours. It was, when you think about it, the perfect weapon, hidden in plain sight in gardens all over Charleston.
So she had her weapon, and Martha spent nearly a full year, planning out every single detail. I want to stress this again. This was not some impulsive act of passion. This was an act of cold, calculated precision.
And this is where you really see her genius shine. It wasn't just about finding the poison. It was about the foresight, the sheer brilliance of the whole plan. Secretly harvesting the leaves for months, coming up with a recipe to completely mask the taste, picking the perfect moment at the feast, and, the most crucial part, arranging her escape before anyone had a clue what was going on. Of course, an investigation was launched. And it was a complete and total failure. You have to remember, toxicology back in 1856 was, well, it was pretty primitive. They tested for the usual suspects, mineral poisons like arsenic, but they had absolutely no way to detect a complex plant-based toxin like the one in oleander. And with Martha gone and no raw ingredients left behind, they had nothing, no proof. The case just went cold.
So that brings us to the big question, right? What happened to Martha? Did she actually get away with it? Well, her story doesn't end in that dining room. Not at all. It ends with a legacy.
She didn't just escape, she thrived. She made it to Philadelphia, built a whole new life under a new name, Martha Freeman. And get this, she was reunited with her daughter Grace. She lived as a free woman for another 41 years, long enough to see slavery abolished in America. And, this is so important, She wrote her entire story down in that book, for all of us to know.
And at the bottom of that poison recipe in her grandmother's book, she wrote just one sentence. For Grace, for Daniel, for Jacob, for all of us. This wasn't just for her. It was for her daughter who was assaulted, for her son who was murdered, for her husband who died from a broken heart. It was for every single person who had ever suffered at the hands of the Fairchilds.
So Martha Cooper's story, it just leaves us with this really difficult question, doesn't it? When you're in a system where the law itself is the weapon, where it's the source of unimaginable cruelty, a system that denies your very humanity, what is the real difference between revenge and justice? And maybe more importantly, who gets to decide?